Well, hello everyone, and welcome to lesson 23, Standardized Achievement Tests. So, as basically a caveat to this lecture, I apologize upfront because I cannot do this lecture on standardized achievement tests without a little bit of bias or a lot of bias from my own point of view on the pros and cons of standardized achievement tests. So I just want to put that out there, that I definitely have some opinions about this, and I think that they will, as I go through, I think you will see how obvious those are. So I'm just going to put that out there so you can make your decisions on that. So again, just to kind of get us started, I see you did well in schools, but what real world skills do you have? Tests. I can take tests. Again, I think we are at the point in our understanding about teaching and learning that absolutely there needs to be some testing. There needs to be some way to, see if kids have a sense of the content. But I think that testing has become a bit of a monster, and that we have got, especially with standardized tests, we have gone away from the origins of what it was for. So that's what we're going to jump into today. So again, my bias is going to come out right away. Here is one of my favorite authors, Ted Dinter, in What Schools Could Be, in I think this is a 2019 book. He writes, the test and measure people have had their day, and they have nothing to show for it. I think there is every opportunity for more aspirational view of what school can be, and where kids are unleashed to find their great skills and passions that will give them a really great chance later in life. So if you read any of Ted Dinter's work, his articles or his books, he is definitely pushing back against standardized testing, and he is an American author, so standardized tests are even more prevalent in American education system, but we definitely have them in our system here in Canada as well. Okay, so speaking of Canada, and specifically Alberta, in 2013, Alberta phased out the long-standing grade 3 provincial achievement tests. This became a divisive topic amongst teachers, parents, students, ATA, and the Alberta government. These tests, pre-COVID time, were being reinstated under our current government. So I want you to keep these questions as overarching questions. What do you think of standardized exams? So keep that spinning in your own head as you go through. And what do you think of them being reinstated in Alberta? So again, we'll have a bit of a go with that, but just keep that in your mind. Okay, before we jump into sort of the debate around standardized tests, let's define some terms, and let's figure out what are we talking about when we talk about standardized tests. So basically, when you are analyzing, let's look at the analysis of standardized test results. So basically, there are criterion referenced standardized tests, and then there are norm referenced standardized tests. So criterion referenced is where the student's score is determined by comparing performance to established criteria. So the student's score is determined by who is taking the test at the time. So it doesn't matter who's taking the test. I got that mixed up. So it doesn't matter if all students get 95% on the test. If they've all answered and shown understanding of the criteria, they all get the grade. So it doesn't matter if student A, student B, student C are writing the test. If student A, B, and C all reach the criteria, they get the grade that they get. Unlike normed reference, this is where student score is determined by comparing performance to that of other students. So that's where it actually does matter who else is taking the exam. So you might have heard this is the bell curve. So this basically is where you have to have a spread of grades from basically failing all the way up to A+, with the bulk of the grades being in like C+, B-, B area. And in a class, so say you are studying at the University of Calgary or U of A, where you have classes of 300, they often will apply the bell curve in order so that they are actually being judged against the other students that are in their class. And so even if you get 90%, if the bulk of the rest of the class got 95%, you would end up getting a failing grade. There's pros and cons to that. It works better with bigger pools of students because it naturally lies a little bit better in the distribution of grades. But years ago, we actually had the bell curve system here. So it was brutal because kids were they were being divided on like 1%. So if you got an 88, you got a B, and if you got an 89, you got a B plus. And so it's kind of crazy. But there are definitely some pros in larger sample sizes to being norm referenced. Okay, there are also different test types when we talk about standardized tests. So there are tests, standardized tests like our Alberta Education Government Exams. So where these are cumulative, where we look at what they should know from the entire year. This is when they are currently in grade 6, 9, and 12, and they are based on a known set of curriculum. So the tests are actually based on the Alberta Education curriculum. You also then have high stakes testing, and these are achievement tests, these are SATs, these are IQ tests. And these are tests that usually have some kind of important consequences. Lots of American universities and colleges use SAT scores for admission into their programs. There are a few universities in California this year that said we are not using SAT scores anymore for admission, which was very bold because it's a very dominant admission test. We don't use them nearly as much here in Canada, but they still are a part of some programs like medicine, and I don't think engineering, but more medicine. These also, you have a general idea of what is on the test, but it's not based on specific curriculum. Okay, so that's what the high stakes test is, general knowledge. And then we have survey battery, which is basically, sorry, my dog was making funny sounds behind me. I was hoping she was okay, but she's fine. Just snoring. I hope you are not snoring like my dog is snoring. Okay, survey battery. These are like Canadian achievement type tests where they test overall literacy and numeracy skills, and it gives sort of general understanding of what students are capable of. Again, it's not based on curriculum, and it's usually more for deciding mandates or direction that the education system should go. So it's a group of individual subject matter tests. Okay, so those are some test types. So here we go. The original purpose of standardized testing is actually quite good. And so when I talk about standardized testing today, I'm going to kind of pull it tight to government exams that most of you probably took some kind of government exams, either in grade 9 or in grade 12. So when you're thinking about standardized tests, think about those so that you have a frame of reference for what I'm going to be talking about around standardized tests. So basically, a standardized test is the original purpose, way back when they were developed, was to assess effectiveness of instruction. So it would show if a teacher was totally missing a key concept, then it would show that, oh, those students didn't do so well on that key concept. So then that should go back to the teacher, and then the teacher should be like, oh yeah, I need to stress that a little bit more in my teaching. It was also to provide information for planning and enhancing instruction. Again, looking where are the students' weaknesses, where are their strengths, and then adjusting or being that reflective practitioner. It was to provide information about student progress. So again, it was a way to see, did Sarah move from this level to this level by the end of the school year? It was a diagnosis of students' strengths and weaknesses. Again, it was a bit of a numerical way to ascertain where the students' strengths and weaknesses were, provide evidence for placement of students in specific programs. So again, if a student needed extra help in literacy or numeracy, this was a way that you could say, okay, they did this well on the standardized tests, and so they need extra support. Help administrators evaluate programs. Again, if you look across and you're like, wow, all of my students at my school are performing at grade level and above, then you say to your teachers, awesome job, keep going, you're doing amazing. And it contributes to accountability. We are one of the biggest in public education. To have public education, it takes money. And so with money, when governments are giving so much money to education, they want a little bit of accountability. So it's like, okay, so how are our students doing with all of this money that we're putting into education? And it's a little bit of accountability there, which I have an issue with putting numbers on an education system that doesn't really gravitate or rotate around numbers, but there it is. That is part of the original purpose for standardized testing. Okay, so some commendations. Look at me go. Commendations, these are the positives of standardized tests. I'm really trying hard here. Okay, so basically it contains the same questions for all test takers. And so that is seen as equalizing. Again, we're going to get into that, but it's seen as equalizing, that everybody gets the same questions. They are administered to all test takers in the same fashion. So there's not, one school that's, being able to take tests on computers and then another school that's pen and paper, or there's not one class where the teacher is helping and there's another class where there's not. So it's all the same. They are scored in systematic and uniform manner. So teachers are very well coached when marking these standardized tests, and each written response goes through at least 2 markers, and maybe more if they're far apart in their evaluation. They are different from teacher-made tests and aptitude tests. They would say, people who are proponents of standardized tests would say teacher-made tests are not consistent. Teachers may actually not be great test writers, and so may actually just give the students the answers in the actual test. And so then it's not actually really testing if the students understand. And some teachers, you've all had, in high school or at post-secondary, you've had teachers that are really hard, and then the teachers are really easy in their marking. And so what they're saying is that this is, again, it's standardized it. It also gives norms for the class, for the school, for the board, for the province, and for the nation. So I'm just going to read this about norms. In order to understand an individual's performance on a test, it needs to be compared with the performance of the norm of the group. Standardized tests let you see how each of your students is doing compared to others in your class, school, board, province, and nation. So again, it gives you that a norm. They are reliable. They have been perfected by the government, exam creators, where basically, now this is really interesting, they can basically create a test to obtain a desired average, because they know they have such a huge database of questions for like your grade 12 government exams, if you were an Alberta graduate that you took. They basically know before any students write the test what the average is, just because they've had so many goes at these questions, and they know that question 21 there's going to be 75% of students are going to get it correct, whereas question 22, they know that only 45% of students are going to get it correct. So they can basically figure out the average of the test before any students write it. So again, when we talk about it's unbiased, okay. And again, it supplies a numerical accountability. So again, when the government's spending millions of dollars on education, it gives them some numbers that they can then go to their stakeholders, and they can go to the press with those kind of things in there. Okay, however, here we go. Here are some criticisms of standardized testing. Basically, the foundational ideology of standardized testing was not to be widespread in school systems. So I'm going to read you this. This is from February 2014 issue of Chicago Union Teacher Magazine. So this is a union teacher magazine. So this is what Karen J. Lewis, the president of that union, is saying about standardized tests. What many people do not know is that the use of standardized tests has its origins in the eugenics movement. And the eugenics movement is the science of improving a human population by controlled breeding to increase the occurrence of desirable heritable characteristics. So that's eugenics. Where basic tenets assert that certain races are inferior to others biologically and intellectually. From our 21st century perspective, we can look back in horror, but we have to be clear about the original purpose of standardized tests. The original IQ tests were designed by French psychologist Alfred Binet for benign and limited uses. For A, on young children who are not developing normally, B, as general tools to make general decisions, not a precise measurement for precise decisions, and C, to signal when a child needed more help in their intellectual development. Unfortunately now, in North America, IQ tests were posited to be fixed and innate and were promptly used to rank and sort individuals by race and ethnic background. Businesses, government agency, and educational institutions used IQ tests to justify placing certain people into certain jobs and excluding them from others. So there's a foundational ideology issue with standardized tests. It was never created to be this sort of widespread. It was for a particular purpose that really actually wasn't even ever in education. Okay. Number 2. There is actually inequality of uniform assessment. I alluded to this and now I'm going to explain a little bit more. So as we strive for differentiation, we talked all about differentiation before in this class, and honoring where the child is at, then what we do is we slam them with a standardized test that every other student in the class is doing. So all of this differentiation that we do in our classes sort of flies in the face of then making every student do the same exam. And it used to be that we thought that that was very equal. Now we're seeing that that actually is really it's actually totally flying in the face of being equal, because then we're not honoring the child where the child is at. What we're doing is saying, okay, yeah, we can do all this in the classroom, but then when it actually comes down to it, here's the test and do what you do with the test. Okay, number 3, it's stressful for students and teachers. So again, how many of you remember being stressed out about government exams? I would say most of you are saying, yeah, at least a little stress. And so were your teachers. Your teachers were also stressed about these exams because they held this weight, which they shouldn't really have held. Okay, and it results in teaching to the test. I'm going to tell you a story about my 2 daughters. They were in a French immersion class in Calgary and it was a split class, grade 5 and 6. So they spent 2 years. I loved her. I love their teacher. She was a great teacher, but they spent 2 years prepping for the grade 6 PAT, which actually my oldest daughter didn't end up writing because we were traveling and we took them out of school for May and June and took them traveling. And so, but they spent so long prepping for these PATs, and I had to just, when I went to parent-teacher interviews, when the teacher talked about prepping for PATs in there. Okay, a few more things about criticisms of standardized tests. It takes up too much time. Again, how many periods did you as a student spend on practicing tests, test questions, taking the test, and what did you have to sacrifice in order to prep for these exams? Probably you had to sacrifice field trips and going deep with some concepts in order to make sure that you knew how to write the test. Okay. Number 6, it does not enhance individual student learning. Again, my girls took the PATs and they got the results the next year in November. So it was just so far removed from their learning. They learned really nothing from it as individual students. And by that point, the teacher is well into his or her next year, and it's hard to kind of go, well, was it the class? Was it my teaching? And so it actually doesn't end up really enhancing individual student learning. And the content of the tests does not reflect instruction. So if I had a standardized tests for you as 321 students, I would basically cover the material on the test. So I would be really irresponsible if otherwise. So if we had a 321 provincial standardized tests, I would teach to that test because I would want you to do well on it. But I may have to skip ideas that are super interesting or super relevant or super current because I would have to teach to that test. So the content of the test would not reflect the instruction that I would want to give you. Okay, so number 8, bias. This is a situation where scores on the tests are significantly higher or lower between cultural groups or gender, and are better able to predict the future performance of one cultural group than the rest of the population. So that's what bias in testing is. So let's have a look at some bias in testing, because this is super interesting. We think that because they are standardized and because they come from afar, that they come unbiased. Standardized tests are definitely not unbiased. So we're going to have a look at this. So, okay, so here's a culturally biased question. So, strawberry is to red as A, B, C, or D. Peach is to ripe, grass is to green, orange is to round, lemon is to yellow. Okay, so it seems fairly straightforward. It would be D. Lemon, which is a fruit, is to yellow, which is red. However, if you are Latin American, actually the fruit called limon is actually green. And so what they found was when this particular question was on an SAT exam, the Hispanic students got this wrong. Not because they didn't understand the correlation between fruit to color, but because culturally lemons are not yellow. In their culture, lemons are green. Okay, interesting. Look at these gender bias questions. This is a math question on a 2016 SAT, involved a chart showing more boys than girls in math class overall. Remember our stereotype fear concept? This is it. So when a girl doing math questions on the SAT sees a chart depicting that there's more boys in math, how does that affect that girl's actual ability to do the test to her best ability? Okay, in a question in the verbal section on the 2016 SAT again, asked students to analyze a 19th century polemic, which is a written argument, arguing that women's place was in the home. 2016. This is a question on the SAT. Arguing that a woman's place was in the home. That's fine if the woman wants to choose to be in the home, but to have to argue on an SAT that the woman's place is in the home is just cannot happen. Okay, here we go. Let's look at now some discriminatory item selection. So in 2003, which is getting a little dated but still has some relevance, potential SAT questions which are answered correctly more often by Black students. So when they filled out all that information about themselves, they found that questions were answered correctly by Black students than white students. They were rejected. Those questions were actually rejected by the test makers, so that it would favor the white students over the Black students. And let's look at basically straight outright racism. 2006 Global History New York State Regents exam asked students to describe how Africa benefited from materialism. So they used a 150-year-old quote, "We are endeavoring to teach the native races to conduct their own affairs with justice and humanity and to educate them alike in letters and industries." And that was part of the question here. So again, when we think about, oh yeah, standardized tests are unbiased, they're free from issues, nope. Okay, so let's pull it straight to home here. Let's look at now. This is from our province in November of 2019. So let's talk about the other side and the inclusion of questions that ask for answers outside of mainstream ideas. So our educational minister, Adriana LaGrange, said that these types of questions need to be taken off the government exam. So basically, this was in a grade 12 social studies exam, and this was a question: which of the following is one of the valid arguments against oil sands development? And so she wants those off because she wrote, "It is concerning that anybody would think that these are appropriate questions for grade 10 social studies tests. Alberta has a great story to tell about a responsibility energy sector, and educators should not be attacking it. We will get politics out of the classroom." So now this is on the other side, that when questions are included that go against the mainstream idea of the province or the nation, should they be excluded? And this was the ATA's response: "Minister, this grossly misrepresents the very professional work of Alberta's teachers. Please retract and apologize." So we can't just say, oh, this is the states. It is home in Alberta here. Okay, so basically, standardized tests should enhance teaching and learning, improve curricular and design, be minimally intrusive. That's if we're going to use them, that's what it should be. But they are often imperfect instruments. They're snapshots of the kids' work. Maybe they have an off day. Maybe they have a great day, but it's just a snapshot. And even the highest quality tests are problematic if used for improper applications. Okay, so in Collaborate, we're going to talk about, think back to your time in school. Do you remember completing any standardized achievement tests? What do you remember about these testing experiences? So what kind of types of tests, teachers' explanations of why you had to complete the tests, how your peers responded to testing sessions, how your own feelings about taking these tests, and what you were told about the test results. So jot a few things down because we're going to have a bit of a time in Collaborate to talk about this. Okay. I apologize for my geekiness on this, but I actually went back and looked at provincial standardized tests in Alberta, and to kind of get a sense of the ebb and flow of standardized testing. So in 1892, exams were given. In 1896, exams were removed because of monetization. Basically, they ran out of money. 1905, exams were reinstated, and they were 100% of the grade. 1912, teacher grades replaced standards, and there were limited exams. 1972, so that was the way it was from 1912 to 1972. In 1972, exams were completely removed, and teacher grade was 100%. That was until 1983, when exams were reinstated at 50% of grade. As a personal aside, I graduated from high school in 1985. So now, looking back with the lens of being in 2021 and having been in education for this long, that was I probably wrote a really bad exam because there were only 2 years of exams, questions, testing, all those kind of things. So I probably wrote either a really easy exam or a really hard exam, and it was 50% of my grade. That has been the state until 2009, when we eliminated written response portions, saving $1.7 million. These tests are expensive. And then it went in 2015, so from 1983 to 2015, government exams were 50% of grade 12 grades in all of those, and all of the key subjects like social science or social biology, chemistry, English, Then it was reduced to 30%. Then in 2018, math written responses were reinstated. And now 2019, because of COVID, everything is kind of on hold, but 2019 grade 3 exams were reinstated and grade 1 and 2 exams were proposed. So it's interesting, the sort of ebb and flow connected to the political sway of the particular government that is in power. But Alberta has had a long history of doing standardized tests, going away from standardized tests, doing standardized tests, going away from standardized tests. I just think it's super cool to look at this. Okay. When you start to look, because as future teachers, your ATA, your Alberta Teachers Association, will be your professional organization. ATA has consistently been opposed to provincial achievement tests, basically from the start. And I just want to show you a couple of, if you want, you can go and look at this complete link, but I just pulled a couple of examples out for you. So basically, here we go. I'm just going to grab my pencil. So teachers are opposed to standardized testing, including achievement testing, when the test is not appropriate to the educational needs of the student and when the results are misused. Classroom teachers should have the right to exempt a student from the provincial achievement tests. Teachers are opposed to the current provincial achievement testing program. Teachers' professional judgment needs to play the central role in assessing student learning outcome. And teachers recognize that pen and paper tests do not evaluate higher order thinking questions. And actually, I'll just read all of them. The ongoing participation of the teaching profession is essential in order to maintain the integrity of the diploma exams program, and public reporting of the test results must include information that prevents the misinterpretation of the results. Okay, so that's your ATA's look at provincial exams. So let's look at this one about the public reporting of test results. Okay, so our government right now, the RUCP education mandate, supports more standardized tests. So I'm actually going to just pull up I'm going to actually just let you have a look through these particular, they're Global News, Chat News, Edmonton Journal. So they are media sources, which of course have some issues, but they're interesting in that their depiction of why and how we are, as a province, we are going back to implementing standardized tests. So I will leave those with you to have a look at, because I want to get to the whole idea of reporting scores to the public. Basically, these PAT scores, these provincial achievement test scores, go to what's the Fraser Institute. And I'm going to just pull up the Fraser Institute. Here we go. No, this one. Okay, so this is the Fraser Institute. So this is an institute that basically takes a whole bunch of numbers and collates them and then puts them out to the public. So our mission is to improve the quality of life for Canadians, their families, and future generations by studying, measuring, and broadly communicating the effects of government policies, entrepreneurship, and choice on their well-being. So it's not just education; it's a whole round, basically around government mandates. So I want to read you this. Measurement is the foundation for all our work. Accurate, rigorous measurement. Now look at this quote. If it matters, measure it, is a slogan you will see around our office. Do you remember my Elliot Eisner quote about not everything that matters can be measured and not everything that is measured matters? It flies totally in the face of the basic, the foundation of the Fraser Institute. Now, the Fraser Institute is how the public gets these numbers and how school boards sometimes get the numbers from the PAT exams. So basically, now I'm going to go here. I'm going to show you, this is Fraser School rankings. So basically what they do is they take the PAT results and then they rank the schools only on their PAT results. So I've just brought up the PAT ranking results for Medicine Hat. So here we are, Cape. So there are 863 elementary schools in Alberta, and Cape is ranked 313th, Connaught 407, Crestwood, Sauer, Wilson. Again, as we know, these standardized tests are a simple snapshot. There's bias issues, and yet this kind of report comes out that looks like hard and fast numbers that we should sort of trust and base. I know in Calgary, when I lived there, parents would actually put their children in schools that had high PAT results, which for me, I was like, no, that's actually the opposite of where I would want my child to be, because I know then they're teaching to the test. Okay, so let's have a look at show all schools because rank, there we go. I just want to show you this. So these are all elementary schools in Alberta. I want to show you this because the first at least 2, 4, 6, 7 of them are private schools in Calgary and Edmonton, where parents pay a lot of money for their children to go to these schools, and they have all, of course, the perks that come with private school. So I think the first public one is Sun Alta. But again, look at where these schools are. Edmonton, Calgary, Edmonton, Calgary, Edmonton, Calgary, Okotoks. Again, though, is it really like we look at these numbers and go, oh, that means that Masters is the best. That's what it equates to in our mind. And that's what it equates to in the public mind. And that's where the ATA has when I put that quote about teachers need to be able to talk about these numbers. That's what I mean, because these numbers stick with people, but they don't actually represent what's really going on at the school. Okay, so then that leads to this kind of press. So dismal math test scores across Alberta spark criticism of standardized grade 9 exam. So again, some blame the education system, others say it's the test. So then you start to get into all of this controversy when things are not, I'm going to go back here, when things are not explained properly, when the public doesn't realize that this is a snapshot, that this is a standardized test, and that these numbers, there's some validity, but you need a lot more information. Okay, so that is reporting scores to public. So in Collaborate, we're going to have a little bit of a go with how do you react to a media report like this one below in light of trying to create meaningful learning experiences through 21st century philosophy and pedagogy. So all these cool ideas, all these things that you're learning here in the education program that you will learn over your years here, and then we get this kind of, sorry, I'm just going to bring this up here. We get this kind of a media report. Hat schools rank low in provincial PATs. According to the Fraser Institute's annual report card on Alberta schools, Medicine Hat schools rank in the lower percentile of achievement on the Provincial Achievement Test and have been trending downward over the past 5 years. So how do you, as the assistant superintendent and superintendent of Medicine Hat Public, how do you respond to this kind of media article in light of trying to move the education system forward and potentially away from being focused on standardized tests and standardized numbers? So that is what we're going to have, hopefully, a good rousing debate about in class. You definitely can go and read this full article, but that is the essence of it. So again, yeah, sorry about the bias. I just can't do this one without some bias, but hopefully you can see some of the pros definitely to using standardized tests, but also be cautious of the test itself and the results that come with it. All right, take care, everybody.